Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at a novella that's in this collection, Lean Times in Lankhmar by Fritz Leiber. It's called Stardock, and it is basically they are our two key characters, Gray Mouser and Fafhrd, who are two thieves, are adventuring in the north. And in the previous short story, in the witch's tent, they were visiting a witch in the north to find out if their adventure to Stardock is going to turn out well. And according to that short story, no. So now we're moving into that adventure. So now their adventure is beginning. In this adventure, they have read a poem that talks about treasure at the top of a mountain called Stardock, the name of this. So now they're going to climb up to the top of this mountain and find the treasure, a jewel of stars that's supposed to be a bag of stars that's supposed to be up at the top that they believe are gems, and so that's it. That's their goal and their quest. After reading this epic poem that tells of it up there, so they are going on their journey. Now it doesn't feel epic, right? Like a novella would normally feel. It just feels like a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, or a side quest in a video role playing game, rather than an actual proper a deeper dive. So it feels more like a short story, but you're spending longer with it. Right, this is only 12 pages, shorter than the longest novella previously that I read in this collection. That was two ago. That was called Adept's Gambit at 96 pages long. It's 12 pages shorter. So I read it. I read that one, Adept's Gambit. If you recall, it was 3 hours long over 3 hours during weekdays for an hour each day at about 32 pages each day. But this was being read over the weekend, and so I knocked out 40. And so knocked out an hour and a half on Saturday, and then an hour yesterday on Sunday, which is a little bit less busy. A little busier than Saturday, which is I don't really have anything. So I was able to knock it out an hour yesterday in 2.5 hours. So it was about a half an hour shorter to read than the previous novella, Adept's Gambit, two stories above this one. So I knocked it out much more ambitiously and so forth. But it just didn't. And while I certainly liked the ending, I think it was fine. It doesn't have the sort of a longer narrative that you would sort of expect from a longer short story like this. I mean, 2.5 hours long, and all you're doing is climbing a mountain. It doesn't really feel that epic or adventurous, right? In that sort of a thing. So I'm only giving this a 7.5 out of 10. Now, that may surprise you, since Fritz Leiber is such a big name in the field. He's one of the most award-winning. He has tons of Hugos, and this series has won Hugos too, for you folks. But yeah, it just didn't have that epic feel for you folks. But it's certainly well written and so forth. But just didn't feel like it was worth the time, right? It's sometimes when you're watching a longer movie and it's still, while it's paced well, but it's 3 hours and you're but it just didn't have an epic feel to it. It didn't have, or a tone to it. And you're why was it 3 hours? Even if it was well paced, it still didn't feel like a 3-hour movie, right? And that's the same thing with this, right? It was a 2-day, 2.5 page, short story, and yet it didn't have that sort of a sense of a feel, an epic feel to it. It really felt more like just a short story that could have been 25 or 30 pages, pretty fine. But again, it's paced well, it's written well, and so forth. So your mileage may vary. You can talk about that more in the comments below for you folks. Again, I'll also link you to this collection online for you folks on Amazon that we're doing a deep dive into. The first short story in this collection was published in 1939, and that was a long time ago. That story was called Two-Sided Adventure, which is republished in later collections. This is Jewels in the Forest, that's also how it's published in this one. So that was my first review I actually did by Fritz Leiber, actually, to be honest. And then I have he died in 1992, and he actually published short stories and novellas in every decade from the 30s to the 90s. He was very, very prolific during his time, one of the most prolific writers in the field, and he published a lot. And so this series is a lot of novellas and short stories over time for you folks, for you guys to check out. And it's very, very influential on modern fantasy too. But anyway, the fact that this guy was so prolific and so influential and such a big name is one of the big reasons why he is a passion of mine. Just like the name of this channel, The Worst Thing About New Books, which is a quote by a French philosopher named Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old ones. And this is definitely older stuff for you folks, since even your early 90s stuff will be published decades ago. So that's where my passion for this stuff comes from. So anyway, again, I talked about how influential he was on modern fantasy, especially this series. For example, this series created sort of the Thieves Guild, the giant large CD city that dominates a plane, with a horror street and a plaza of dark lights and stuff like that. He also created the concept and the archetype of thieves. So for example, you're playing the aforementioned video game RPG that we talked about before, where this feels more like a side quest than a major quest, even though it's long. If you have a thief character in that, then you are playing a character straight from this series, with all the abilities and all the quests and so forth. And if you're playing in this seedy giant city, then you're playing in Lankhmar. That was first sort of discovered and explored there for you folks. So those are both key influences. Also, when I was talking about role-playing games, that actually was true too. In 1979, in a first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, the co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax, in appendix N listed the influences in this series, and this character and this raw author are listed as a key influence that he took the inspiration from. So there's also a credit there. And this was turned into a role-playing setting for that RPG too, Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s. So you can actually adventure in Lankhmar. And you could do an adventure based as a dungeon master base. You could put together an adventure based on Stardock. And I'm sure it would be a lot of fun. So that's kind of cool too. For you folks. Also, this guy published a lot. Like I mentioned before, he's one of the most awarded. He has a Stoker Award for horror. I've read some stuff in the Cthulhu Mythos. In fact, I've reviewed one short story for you. And he was an acolyte of H.P. Lovecraft, the guy who created the Cthulhu Mythos, and encouraged his other writers. And they wrote a lot back and forth, and he edited a lot and was a nice feedback for Fritz Leiber before Leiber published in 39, a couple of years after Lovecraft died in 37. So that was pretty tragic. But he was a big influence in Leiber's early writings. And then also, like I said, he also has written a lot of science fiction stuff too. For example, we've already reviewed a short story for you that was in a collection by the Science Fiction Writers of America, of the Hall of Fame, that I've done a review for you folks too. That's pretty cool. So he's a big name in all three fields that I cover here on the channel. So going back and rereading this series is a lot of fun stuff. So there you are. I'll go ahead and maybe have you read the novella Stardock? If so, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree? My 7.5 out of 10. Let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I just want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it in watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.